When I took a few months off from making videos on this channel, it wasn't just because I was super burnt out of work and I didn't have the motivation to read during that time. It was also because I didn't know what direction I wanted to take this channel, and I didn't really know what I wanted to put out there in this massive, incredible community of readers and lovers of literature. And I took a few months off. I recalibrated, I watched a metric crapload of booktube videos, and I realized the stuff that I enjoyed watching the most and the stuff I enjoyed talking about the most was just explaining and exploring and developing my reading journey. And as I grow as a reader and learn more from you guys and your comments and your videos, I myself grow as a person through your recommendations, and I also grow as a lover of literature. So I thought a really important step to catalog my journey as a reader is to just get the most important books that I've ever read on record and to just talk about why they matter to me. Because these are the books that have shaped me as me. I wouldn't be here without these 5 or 6 books that I have here. They're the books that have come to me at the most important times in my life. They're the books that have inspired me the most. They're the books that have gotten me out of depression and slumps and being who I am. And I wouldn't be here without them. So frankly, I just wanted to sit down, talk about why I love them, gush for probably like 20 minutes, and then move on and talk about other books that I've been reading. I've been reading Moby Dick. I'd love to talk about that. So before I start, I just want to quickly preface that these aren't the best books that I've ever read in my entire life. I think when I talk about 2 of them, I'll probably mention how they aren't even my favorite out of a certain author that I absolutely adore. But they just matter to me because they have basically pushed me into the direction that I am now. I mean, I lived in Massachusetts and now I'm teaching high school English in Los Angeles, California, and I wouldn't be here without some of these books and the avenues they've kind of pushed me towards. I'm also going to talk about these books in terms of the most recent that I've discovered and kind of getting to the most important one at the end, which if you guys have seen my videos, you guys have probably also heard me talk about a number of times. But that most important book I want to save to the end because it's the book that got me into reading. It's the book that made me realize I want to be a teacher. The book that made me realize that we can all get something different from literature. It's kind of what opened my eyes to classic literature. It's what opened my eyes to everything. But before I start, I do want to know the books that are the most important to you guys because frankly, I see them, I look them up, I go, holy crap, that sounds amazing. And then I throw them in a cart that I'm going to buy later. I go on thrift books and I buy them and I add them to my long collection of books that I want to eventually read. So if you could, just let me know what your most important books are that you've ever read in your entire life. What books took you down the path that you are now? I would love to just see what inspired you guys because to me, I kind of love that community aspect of this where you guys help me become a better learner and I just get to grow. The more I hear from you guys, just the better I end up, and I just love your recommendations. The first book that I have that is actually the most recent discovery that I've made, and I actually was recommended this because I was at a bookstore with Drunzo, or you might know him as Mark, and he just kind of threw a book at me and was like, read it, everyone loves it. And I was like, okay, I'll read it. And knowing Drunzo's recommendations, they never fail me, and that's what happened with Stoner from John Williams. I actually made an entire video about that where I kind of just sat down and was like, I'm speechless. I don't really know what to talk about with this book. It just means that much to me. And I've watched a ton of videos of people talking about Stoner here on BookTube, and everyone really seems like they have the same kind of reaction, which is just, this is the book that makes reading worth reading. Or even, I think someone by Leaf or Better Than Food, who are 2 incredible booktubers, said something along the lines of like, this is what makes life worth living is books like Stoner. And I can't put it better myself. I think of myself at times as like an optimistic nihilist, which I know is super contradictory, but I try to see beauty in the nothingness of the world, which is a really weird stance to have, but that's ultimately why I love Stoner so much. And if you haven't read Stoner, first, please go check it out. But if you have, I think we can all agree that this book is just incredible. It stars William Stoner, who's a professor at a Southern college, and basically he is just trying to make his way in life. And he loses a lot of purpose in the world, and he's a man who just constantly gets hit down and down and down, but just manages to find the beauty in the nothingness, in the cruelty that is the world, and finding those little slivers of happiness that keep people going. And I found myself at times moved to speechlessness, which is not something that I do. I mean, as a teacher, I have to talk and talk and talk and talk, but sitting there reading certain passages, just stunned out of my mind, not knowing how to process what I just read, not knowing that a book could so deeply touch the center core of who I am, I was dumbfounded by this book. I really like, even 6 months or 7 months after reading it for the first time, I still don't know how to fully process the impact that it had on me. But as you can probably see, it got me in the direction of NYRBs, which is the New York Review of Books, which is basically contemporary classics or classics that haven't just aged yet, which is essentially just my favorite type of literature. It feels like it's that gap between the classics that we have stigmatized so heavily, like Moby Dick, like Wuthering Heights, and new classics that in 100 years that we might look back and go like, holy crap, these are the greatest pieces of like the 20th century. And to me, I can't think of a book that has had a more recent and long-standing impact than Stoner. It's a book that I want to read in the next few months again, which is not something that I do often with books. I try to take at least a year or two between them to truly let them sit in, to explore other books, and then to come back to this. But I really can't do it justice. I did make another video on it, but I would just recommend watching other videos from other booktubers about Stoner and just seeing how it makes them breathless, because they're more eloquent speakers than I am, and I think they can better convey why you should read this book. But I loved it. If you for some reason haven't read it, please just do that. I'd love to talk to you about it. This is a book that, like, send me an email, send me a comment. I would love to discuss this book with you. The next book that we have actually brings me back to my senior year of college, and this is when I kind of recognized the depth of literature and the amount of research and work and subtlety that can go into every single word constructed. And that's the short story collection by Jorge Luis Borges on mysticism. And it's a very short collection, and I read it for a South American literature class. And Jorge Luis Borges is an Argentinian author who wrote a bunch of short stories, and he was an essayist, and I believe he was a columnist as well. But we took an entire class on his works and his short stories. And for me, I read and devoured The Library of Babel and The Aleph. And I spent a month on each short story, analyzing them, dissecting each and every word, looking at his life, looking at every other historical context that led up to his manifestation of this book, looking at the context that influenced the book and the story at the time of writing. I would look at certain conjugations of word in other languages. I would analyze every single word and the constructions of word and sentences. I didn't know at the time that it was possible to go this in depth and to have an author be this incredibly profound with their language and the construction of their words. This book taught me how to analyze. It taught me the in-depth nature that is literature. It taught me that there are other countries out there of incredible authors that I've just never read. I have read this book in this short story collection 5 or 6 times, and each time I somehow pick up something new. I don't really get it. I've spent a month each on those short stories. Those were my assignments. Analyze one of his short stories. We had to do it twice, and I did The Library of Babel and The Aleph. I don't know what else to say about this. It basically taught me how to analyze and how to construct ideas and how to really, really work something to its utmost limit, and then realize that I didn't know half of it. And I thought that was the most jaw-dropping, amazing thing ever. This is my favorite short story collection. That's not like a very big recommendation. I haven't read much, but this is the short story collection that I bought for like $15 for a class, and I'll read it 100 more times over the course of my life. I love, love, love On Mysticism. I can't recommend this enough. It's really the book that got me to closest to where I am now in terms of understanding the sheer prowess an author can have. And also at the same time, that just made everyone else more daunting, recognizing like, oh my God, if I ever want to tackle like Ulysses, like my friend Matt's from Matt Bookshelf did a series on Ulysses, and just skimming some of that book and going, where do I even begin? And I learned that from Jorge Luis Borges in his collection On Mysticism. The last 2 most important books that I had in college were Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte and Willa Cather's A Lost Lady. Now, these 2 books, I'm pretty sure everybody has read, so I don't really know how much I have to talk, especially about Wuthering Heights. But Willa Cather's A Lost Lady is a really interesting book. It's really short as well, and I read it for an American fiction class. And I did not know about Willa Cather before I read this book, but similar to Jorge Luis Borges On Mysticism, these 2 books got me interested in women's literature. I would not be as intrigued by the sociocultural impact that societies had on women in literature and how they had to subtly express their frustrations with the world and how the world can so brutally suppress them and all their joy and happiness. And that's what Willa Cather's A Lost Lady is. It talks about kind of this like Midwest town and this incredibly bright and magnetic woman whose brightness overshadows everyone else, and how that society slowly starts to take that away. This isn't even my favorite Willa Cather book. That's actually My Antonia, or Antonia, I think is how you say it. But this is the book that got me into Willa Cather. This is the book that kind of made me stop and go, wait a second. There are more like modernist authors besides Hemingway and Fitzgerald. Holy crap, I have to check her out more. And then I bought like 8 of her books, and I've just been slowly going through them. But if for some reason you've never read Willa Cather, she's someone who I can see in like 5 years just being my favorite author. Her analyzation and her ability to weave subtext into anything is just incredible. I led in college a presentation, a multi-class presentation on the first chapter of this book, and it was the most fun I've ever had. It's a part of why it kind of like pushed me into teaching, seeing how I could get other people to try to see what I saw and to see if I could get them as excited about the book that I could. It's something that really just kind of pushed me further into teaching, and I adored like every single second of it. So that's Willa Cather's A Lost Lady. And a book that needs no introductions is Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, my favorite Victorian lit book. I wanted to talk about this book because of stigma around classics. And I don't know if this is going to be a really obscure reference for people over like 25, but for my generation, I have a bunch of younger siblings, and they were really into the show Good Luck Charlie. I don't know if you guys ever remember that show. It's one of my favorite Disney shows when I was younger, but it's a show that I remember so clearly that one of the characters, PJ, made a joke about this book because he had to write it as an assignment or write a book report on it for class. And that entire episode was spent just crapping on this book and being like, it's the most boring thing ever. I think they even try to get friends to write it, and they just half-ass these papers, and it sucks. And I remember being young and going, damn, Wuthering Heights must be an awful book. It must be just the most boring thing ever. And then I signed up for a class called Victorian Monstrosity in college, which was just the most badass name for a class. I saw that and was like, yep, I'm in. But they had Wuthering Heights on their reading list. I was like, oh no, it's that book from Good Luck Charlie. Because at this point, I was reading a lot, but I wasn't this really verbose reader. I knew about this book, but I had never like tried to read it, or frankly even tried to break away the stigma from it. But I remember seeing it going like, oh shit, this book's gonna suck. Like, oh my god, like it's 400 pages, and I'm gonna hate every second of it. And we finally got to it, and I read like 8 pages, and I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, I'm an absolute moron. Why did I never pick this up sooner? I was blown away. I'm not someone who, at least in college, I tried to maintain the pace of the class because I didn't want to become overwhelmed or forget stuff because it was for my degree. But I just finished this in like 4 days. I was a book assigned over like 2-3 weeks, and I just finished it in 4 days and was like, this is the greatest piece of literature I've ever read. It single-handedly got me into women's literature, knowing that this was a female author and learning about all the subtext and having an incredible professor walk me through what's so deeply sad and morose about this book and Emily Bronte's treatment by other people in the world left me legitimately stunned. And it's a book that I've been dying to reread, but it's just a book that just made me recognize that classic literature is incredibly stigmatized. And it's something that is really scary because it's something that I'm seeing even as a teacher, where I'm teaching the kids The Scarlet Letter right now by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Before we even read like The Scarlet Letter, before I even like did anything with it, I tried to contextualize it. I taught a few lectures about it, but they just like rage quit it. They're like, I don't want to read this. Like, threw their books on the ground because they've heard so many bad things about it. And I was like, no, I promise. It's more than that. But just seeing a class of like 30 kids all universally not like a book in advance because of the stuff they've heard about it really just scared me a little bit for the future of literature and the future of the younger generations in terms of reading, because I was a victim of stigmatized books by media and media making jokes about it. But it stopped me from reading a book that slowly became one of my favorite books and one of the most important books to me I've ever read. It really tuned me into classic literature, women's literature, the Victorian era. I mean, I actually want to read Anthony Trollope, and I want to one day read all of his works, which that's just like 60 books of like 500 pages each, but I wouldn't be here right now ranting about women's literature like I do in all my videos without Wuthering Heights. It's just my favorite book by a female author. It's my favorite Victorian era book. I adore it more than anything, and I'm really excited to reread it again. Now we have to journey back to high school, Tyler, where I was a very young, very scared, very childish young boy, and I didn't really know much about reading, but I enjoyed it a lot. I read a lot of sports books, I read a lot of nonfiction books, but one day when I was working at my town's library, which I know sounds very cliche because it absolutely is, I was like, oh crap, I have a 45-minute lunch break, I need a book to read. And I just walked through my shelves, and I found this book, Colorless Tazaki in His Years of Pilgrimage by Haruki Murakami, on the shelf. And it wasn't this edition, it was this small little condensed version that was super thick, but super tiny and basically like compacted into something small. But I'll even throw up a picture of the title of the cover of the book that I saw. And I was like, this is interesting. This looks really cool. Why not? I'll just grab it and I'll read it. And I sat on my lunch break and I missed like the next 30 minutes of work after my 45-minute lunch break. My bosses had to come out and get me, and I got in trouble because I was so engrossed in this author, in this book, in learning about just these characters in reading Japanese literature, because it wasn't something that I ever did in my life. And right now, after having read all of Murakami's works, this isn't even in my top like 5. I mean, I adore this book. I've read it like 4 or 5 times. But to me, it's not my favorite of his. His has stuff that's better, but to me, I can't ever forget this book, and I'll carry it everywhere I go, no matter where I move, no matter where I live. I will always have a version of this book with me because I don't know what my life would be if I didn't stop and grab that book. And I know that sounds really hyperbolic and kind of really stupid, but it really just set me on a different path. Not the content of the book, not even the author itself, but the recognition that there is more out there in literature than just the books that I was spark noting in high school or the sports book that I was reading. And it was also just kind of revamped my mindset of the endless possibilities of literature, that I randomly walked through my shelves, randomly picked this book, and I was transported to a world that transfixed me from page 1. And I really don't think it's hyperbolic to say that I would not be where I am today if I hadn't randomly picked this book off a random shelf in my library that I was employed with because it was the best part-time job I could find at the time. If I somehow got a different job, or if I somehow went to the shelf before, or if my eyes just happened to gloss over it like it did the hundreds of other books that day, I really don't know if I'd be here in California as an English teacher making these types of videos. And again, it's not even one of my favorite books of his. I've made 2 videos about him. One of them is questioning if he's a sexist author or not, and I use this book as evidence against him. But to me, the impact of it is just that I don't know where I would be without it. It again, sounds hyperbolic, but it means that much to me. I really am just like, I can fondly remember the first few times flipping through the pages, learning about the story, engrossed in what was happening to Tsukuru Tazaki and why his friends abandoned him, and learning about that mystery and learning about the turns of that and the dynamics of relationships and the aspects of people and identity are just the best things that I've ever read at that time, and the most impactful things I've ever read. I adored this book more than anything. Now we finally arrived at the book that started it all. It's a book that has a video on my channel talking about it. It's a book that I would not be a high school teacher. I would not be into literature. I would not be into anything that I probably would be without The Catcher in the Rye. It's very cliche. Some of you probably rolled your eyes. Some of you were like, that book kind of sucks, and I can't disagree with you. It's not my favorite book ever, but it is the most important to me because of one key thing. When I was younger, I used to just be very defiant that people wouldn't like what I liked. Movies, books, video games, music, anything. They didn't like what I liked, and I would just be like, why don't you get it? Why aren't you seeing what I'm seeing? And then I read this book in my junior year of high school, and I ate it up. I loved every single second of it. I'm so transfixed by the character of Holden Caulfield. I know that's kind of like a red flag. I get it. I understand the jokes about it, and that the guy who read it then went on to kill John Lennon, and after he shot John Lennon, he sat down and read it. I get all the negative stigma around it and why people hate it, are annoyed with Holden Caulfield, but to me, I finished this book and I was ready to just be in a classroom of people that loved it. And instead, I got a class of 80% of people that hated every single second of it, and I couldn't process why. When I was younger, I couldn't process it. I didn't know why. So I would just engage in discussions. I would just engage in why didn't people like it, asking them about it, quizzing them about it, trying to figure out everything. And it's when I came to the conclusion that, and it's going to sound really childish and stupid, that two people can view the exact same thing and get two completely different things out of it. And that realization shaped me and shocked me to my core. My favorite assignment I've ever done in school is a debate on whether or not Holden Caulfield is a role model, which I know is like, wait, what? But it was the most fun assignment I've ever had, trying to not defend him, being like, no, he is not a role model. He's so broken. And seeing what happens and watching the other arguments and recognizing that, oh my God, I want to talk more about books like this. I want to discuss literature. I want to be around it in my life. I want this to be a staple in my life. And I've read this book about 5 times now. It's the book I've read the most in my entire life, outside of maybe like some early middle school Magic Tree House or the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books that I used to read on repeat. Maybe that book should be on this list. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I used to read that every morning before school. But yeah, it's what got me into teaching, learning how to best navigate people who didn't see what I see, and learning how to approach and being passionate about it and seeing people respond to that and being like, damn, this is something I just want to be around forever. It's basically what got me here, and it's what got me to making videos, and it's what basically shaped me as a person. Not the messages of the book, but what I took away from it and its impact. And this is still the edition that I have from high school. This is my most prized possession, so please don't break into my apartment and steal it. It's an old ratty copy that I should probably update, but I got it for like $3 from a used book sale. And it's just something that just means the world to me, and I really can't express it enough. It's why I'm here. It's why I'm a teacher. It's why I love music and movies and books and life, and just, I wouldn't be here without this book. And again, I know these sound hyperbolic, but genuinely, if I sat down and didn't like this book, I don't know where I would be or what I would be doing. It's the reason I'm a teacher. It's the reason I went to college. It's the reason I went to grad school. It's the reason I moved to California. It's the reason I'm here now talking with you guys, hoping that I can hear your opinions on it, because I know some people hate it. And I love that people hate it, because I love when people get passionate about this kind of stuff. So that actually brings us to the end of the video. Those are my 5 or 6 most important books that I've ever read in my entire life. No other books right now that I've read so far have meant as much to me as those 5 or 6 did right there. So again, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you're interested, let me know what the books that inspired you are, because I'd love to see where you guys are coming from, your arguments, why you love them, and really if I can then read them myself, because what better way to connect with you guys than to read what impacts you? And I think that'd be really awesome. If you haven't already, go check out my friends Drunzo and Matt. Drunzo made this incredible video on Herodotus, like an hour and 10 history lecture that is just so fascinating. It's so fascinating to the point I went out and bought the exact book he was talking about. And my friend Matt is having another video, I think, come out soon on Suetonius, another ancient Roman scholar or dictator. I'm not as knowledgeable on that as I am. But if you guys like the video, first off, thank you. And thank you for all the support. And yeah, I really hope to hear from you guys on what are your favorite books and your most important books. And with that, have a nice day, and I'll see you again soon.